Okay, so we make a chance to start this Cabinet meeting. Please, colleagues, start with the apologies. Any apologies? Okay. Next item, late items. We have two addendums to item 17 and a revised report for item 20. Item 3, there's no receipt of petitions. Number 4, there are no urgent items to which call-in will not apply. Number 5, declarations of interest. Okay, there are none. Item 6, to approve the minutes of the meeting held on 17th of January 2018. Okay, they're moved. Okay, show of hands please to approve those. That's great, thank you. Okay, so recommendation executive scrutiny board, as we do, we'll take them in turn as they come up. The first key decision is number 8, that determine school admissions arrangements for Derby City maintained and voluntary control schools 2019 to 2020. Over to Councillor Russell, please. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is a regular report that I bring to Cabinet every year to determine the admission arrangements for local authority controlled schools. There has been no change, as members will see, from the previous report to the admissions criteria. So I don't feel the need to go into too much detail about that really, but just to pick up on a comment made at scrutiny last night. They requested that Council Cabinet seek further clarification from the Strategic Director of People Services on the admissions arrangements relating to the High Court ruling on admission arrangements for summer-born children. I understand that that's not actually a High Court ruling, but a subtle change to the guidance, but I'll let Andy give his view on that as requested by the Executive Scrutiny Board.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. So, yeah, this doesn't relate to a court ruling, but more to a change to the admission code. As summer-born children can sometimes be behind on development in terms of readiness to start school for the first time in comparison to their peers who were born earlier. So comparing somebody born in October to somebody born in July or August, and therefore they can sometimes struggle to catch up, but be in the same reception year. So this was based on national DfE studies and research rather than a High Court ruling, and the admissions code was amended to legally allow summer-born children to have the option to stay behind an academic year, i.e. in reception, even though they should be in year 1 based on their age. And this change to the code gives parents choice in relation to those children born in the summer for the reception intake year only. So just to clarify that, Chair.
Thanks, Andy. So that doesn't materially impact on the contents of the report, so I'd just like to recommend Council Cabinet approve recommendations 2.1 and 2.2.
Councillor Shanker, please. Okay, sorry, I was just putting it. Okay, so they have no one wants to speak on this or make any point. So Cabinet to approve the recommendations as set out in the report. Show of hands, please. Okay, great, thank you. Okay, next agenda item is 9, East Midlands Regional Adoption Agency. Over to Councillor Bolton, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The regionalisation of adoption is set out in statute for full national implementation by 2020 via the formal establishment of 2 or more local authorities to create regional adoption agencies, hence the RAAs. To date, there have been 6 established, covering 30 local authorities. The main objectives of establishing them are to ensure that the pathway from identification to adoption is improved and there are sufficient adopters to meet the need. Derby City Council, all the local authorities and lead members have been part of the RAA East Midlands development since 2015. The key objectives of partners has been quite clear, that establishment of any RAA must result in improved outcomes for children and young people, and that is of paramount concern to us here in Derby. We do what's best for the child, and must be within existing budgets. Given the size of East Midlands, it is pragmatic that the 4 neighbouring authorities of the D2 N2 form an RAA, and this proposal would be accepted by the DfE. There is a DFE-sponsored project team that will oversee the transition process till September this year. The 4 local authorities highlighted have been working together as a pilot, as Cabinet knows, because a previous report has been received here, since July 2017, to deliver a permanency service across the D2N2 to test whether this arrangement would be the best fit. The interim evaluation in December 2017 confirms that the time between identification of a child for adoption and achieving permanence has been considerably improved, as well as the local authorities being able to access a wider pool of adopters. This report is to seek agreement in principle to Derby progressing with Nottinghamshire, Nottingham City and Derbyshire to form a D2N2 regional adoption agency by September this year. This will mean agreement in principle to the following: a shared service and creation of a single delivery model across the D2N2 area, all 4 local authorities pool adoption budgets together. Our budget is 968,000. Adoption staff are to be seconded or 2P'd into a host RAA, depending on what model we choose, and hold the budget. And this has been identified as Nottinghamshire after much evaluation. We're the first local authority to come to Cabinet. The others are scheduled later on this year. Unions have been kept informed through JCC, and I've attended some of those meetings to explain to staff the implications. I must remind Cabinet that we as a local authority do retain the sovereignty as corporate parents for looked after children, as well as inspection. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Bolton, can you comment at all on the recommendations and whether you're happy
Yes,
to...
I move the recommendations as printed.
And the recommendations...
The recommendations as far as last night...
Sorry, Councillor Bolton. And
Scrutiny.
Yes, scrutiny,
Yes,
beg your pardon.
sorry, I forgot
Apologies.
about that. Yes, my apologies, I couldn't attend scrutiny last night, but Andy did on my behalf, so thank you to Andy. The Executive Scrutiny Board resolved to note their concerns. They were concerned about the speed, and I'm sure Andy will elaborate that if he feels the need to. But clearly we need to do this ourselves, otherwise we will be forced by government into a situation that perhaps we don't want. So hence us taking this stance now in partnership, as I explained, with the D2N2, which I think is a logical move. And the final issue from scrutiny is clearly we will take it back and give them a full report as they've requested later on in the summer. We're happy to do that, Chair.
So thank you, Councillor Bolton, for that clarification. So to Cabinet to approve the recommendations set out in the report and the further recommendations from Councillor Bolton. Can I have a show of hands, please? Okay. Thank you. Okay, agenda item number 10, council tax exemption for care leavers. That's Councillor Bolton again. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it gives me great pleasure to present this report because it's something that we as a Cabinet have been exploring for some time. It has taken, I know, some time for staff, particularly in the financial section, to get and deal with the nitty-gritty of this, but I'm pleased that this report is here this evening so we can actually move on from our next financial year, hence that being April. And when Andy and I attended the Leaving Care Council and indeed the Children in Care Council who are getting ready for independent living as care leavers, we've heard firsthand that they do find it a struggle to deal with their independence and indeed budget setting, handling their own budget. So this has had a real impact on them, and Andy and I have heard firsthand from them as to the help it will give them. And also when I attended the conference in Bournemouth last autumn, this was an issue that the Children's Commissioner raised at a policy setting meeting, asking Cabinet members to go back to their authorities to actually ensure that the council tax exemption can be authorised for care leavers. So I'm very pleased that Anne Longfield will be getting a letter from me shortly to say that it has gone through Cabinet, hopefully this evening as outlined. But I hope members have found the supportive document useful. I'm afraid it was a bulky document, but having sat and read them last night, it does give you an insight of the challenges that our care leavers have to face. And I think this report and the implications it will have on them will actually assist them in their budget preparation. We are diligent corporate parents, and clearly we go through that as conscientiously as we can, but we mustn't forget we need to have the same support in hand for care leavers as well. And I'm pleased to report that Derby Homes, who will be reporting at corporate parenting next week, are looking at some other initiatives to help our care leavers. But this is just the first step on many steps that we're taking to assist our care leavers. I was pleased to see the report from last night's scrutiny in that they support the recommendation, and I need to say that it will not have any implication on their future benefit claims. I know that was an issue that was raised last night, and I can assure Cabinet, and it can be taken back to Scrutiny Board, that will not have any implications on their benefit situation. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Repton.
Thank you, Chair. I welcome this report. I think it's excellent and it's progressive. I've been lobbied by a number of constituents who support a national campaign to encourage councils like Derby to adopt such policy. So I'm totally in support of it, as I know my colleagues will be as well, and will be amongst a small but growing number of authorities in this country who've taken on board council tax exemption for care leavers and taken their responsibilities as corporate parents seriously and put those into action. Thank you, Chair.
Just to say, Chair, I echo what Councillor Repton's just said, and Councillor Bolton. It's a very welcome move.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it certainly is welcome, because obviously people who are entering the adult world without parents don't have those same advantages that other people have, particularly, as the coined phrase now is, the bank of mum and dad. I was just wondering, are there any, obviously other authorities have implemented this, if they'd come up with, against any unexpected issues, like any other groups saying, well, you know, my situation is very much like that, although I'm not a care leaver, why can't I also have an exemption, etc., etc. I just wondered whether there are any other issues that we've obviously then hopefully be able to learn from how other authorities have dealt with them.
I'm personally not aware of those, Chair. I don't know if Councillor Bolton is.
It is in part of the report that there has been a cross-section of political parties who have implemented this, including in local Birmingham. And from what I discussed at the conference back in Bournemouth, that there hasn't been any issues that clearly the councils have had to overcome because of this, which is welcome. But if I do hear of anything, then I'll share it with Councillor Skelton.
Okay, so Cabinet to approve the recommendations as set out in the report. Can I have a show of hands, please? Okay, all right, that's great, thank you. Okay, agenda item number 11, adult social care fees and charges. Councillor Repton, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is the standard report that comes each and every year. The summary, I think, contains the reasons behind this proposal. It's basically to reflect inflationary costs that have been incurred in residential and nursing placements, home care services, and also to reflect the minimum wage or hourly rate of £10.18 for sleepovers in 2.3 on page 2. So the recommendations are as printed, Chair. Any questions, I'm sure myself or the Strategic Director will be able to answer. Thank you.
Okay, nobody's indicated they wish to speak on this, so Cabinet to approve the recommendations as set out in the report. Show of hands, please. Okay, thank you. No, that's all right. Yes. Okay, agenda item number 12, development of high-quality office complex. Councillor Rawson, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm delighted to present this report to Cabinet this evening. In terms of building on the Connect Derby portfolio of office buildings that the City Council already runs, hugely successful, very high levels of occupancy, and very helpful in supporting us as a city in terms of supporting start-up businesses. That's very much where the focus of the existing Connect Derby buildings are. So helping those those new businesses to start up and grow, and contributing towards our pledge of creating jobs for people in Derby. The proposal set out in the report is to add to the Connect Derby portfolio with a new high-quality office complex on Bold Lane. The City Council does already own the land. In fact, it was purchased with this very much in mind. The site is next to the Sadler Bridge Studios scheme, so will fit very nicely and complement the offer that's already available there. The approach is slightly different in that the target market will be for slightly larger businesses, so the space that's available will be larger. Hopefully some of the smaller businesses that we've already helped and supported in some of our existing buildings are now growing and are potentially at the point where they're looking to expand and to move into bigger office premises. I think this will certainly meet that demand, and the message that we've had back from the from other developers and agents in the city is that this will be very popular, and there will be certainly a high demand for the development. Funded, Chair, through prudential borrowing and through a contribution from the city's regeneration fund. Over time, that borrowing will be repaid from the rents that are generated from the building, and will make a small surplus for the City Council over time. So this really is a win-win in terms of providing more jobs, providing income for the City Council to help support our other services, and to help local businesses grow and expand. So I recommend this wholeheartedly, Chair, to the Cabinet colleagues.
Thank you, Chair. It was just to say there was some discussion about the level of risk that being quantified by officers, but we can probably talk about that in the pink paper side.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Holmes. Yes, there is a pink paper to consider as well a little bit later on, so we can cover that there.
It's a bit like the gift that keeps on giving. I mean, this is yet a further example of initiative that Councillor Rawson has brought to this council, which is part of quite an innovative and exciting jigsaw of initiatives that this council is showing to bring investment into our historic city centre, create new jobs, create new housing in the city centre, create employment and the incomes that goes from that, increase business rates. So this is something that's really to be welcomed by everybody in the city, and I just hope that it receives the positive publicity that it actually deserves. Thank you, Chair.
And just taking off where Councillor Repton has left off, positive publicity. Obviously this is very welcome news, but certainly the other portfolio of the council's various office provision for different types of businesses seems not to be very well publicised, and certainly when someone I know was looking for that sort of small office type of accommodation within the East Midlands, there was plenty sort of online promotion of what Nottingham do, and nothing from Derby, which rather surprised him. But I think we need to look at that and make sure that we are up there and making sure we're in people's faces. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Skelton. I know there is a website presence for Connect Derby, and I know Anne Batty and her team do a sterling job in terms of promoting the Connect Derby offices. We do have a very high level of occupancy, and that's perhaps why there'll be a limited supply of offices and units becoming available. But as and when they do become available, I know that they are promoted very well. All the local estate agents are very well aware and very complimentary of Connect Derby, so I know that they do a good job as well, or Marketing Derby as well. Obviously you're on the board, Councillor Skelton, and I know we've had discussions at the board about the need for office developments, and John Forkin, I know, will be doing his utmost to promote the Connect Derby schemes as well.
Right, so can we approve the recommendations, including, I think we're happy to accept this request from Scrutiny Board that future business cases for this type of project include the likelihood and impact of risks as part of the risk register. So can we approve the recommendations? Show hands, please. Okay, thank you very much. Agenda item number 13, social impact bond for children in care and on the edge of care. Councillor Bolton, please. Okay. And Andy Smith, please, the Strategic Director.
Thank you, Chair. Social impact bonds are an alternative form of social investment being increasingly used in the public sector to fund a range of different services and service improvements involving local authorities, investors and providers. They are different ways of providing services, since payments are made on the basis of clear outcomes being achieved rather than traditional methods of how the council funds or commissions services. There's an increasing body of evidence detailing how other local authorities such as Essex, Manchester and Birmingham have been using social impact bonds in children's social care to great impact and effect. In Derby, we've been working in recent months with Nottingham City and Nottinghamshire County in developing a joint approach with a clear focus on developing a social impact bond approach for children in care and children on the edge of care, which is an area that has one of the most significant impacts on our council budget. This report is to seek Cabinet permission to progress to the next stage in this development, which is to proceed with a joint procurement between Derby City, Nottingham City and Nottinghamshire County Council to scope the development of a social impact bond to support children in care and children on the edge of care. This would be a new way of working for all three local authorities. It's recognised and outlined in the report there may well be risks in this approach. The key is going to be really nailing and being explicit about the outcomes that you'd expect to achieve from this approach and identifying the right children for intervention. But there are also many advantages potentially as well, such as investors and providers bringing different and additional or new services into a city which would normally be things that we might not be able to afford. All of these issues and risks and opportunities will be further considered during the procurement and engagement process. And that process will take a number of months. So at the beginning of a journey, beginning of a process, and the conclusion would need to come back to Cabinet in terms of outlining the risks and implications for Derby to really then work through whether this is something that is in Derby's best interests. There was a very helpful discussion about this at Scrutiny last night, just looking at the recommendations that came out of Scrutiny, and I think because it's conceptually a different way of us working with families, I think Scrutiny would welcome, once we've gone through the procurement process, a further report, and I think Cabinet would feel the same, and for us to include some case studies that bring it to life a bit, because we're learning about this at the same time as going through the process, working with the other authorities that have got them in place already. So I would just ask Cabinet to consider the recommendations as listed.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, there was some discussion cross-party. Councillor Eldrick had a lot to say about this, and everyone contributed. And I think the overall agreement was that, yeah, of course, we understand that moving towards this could potentially be a very positive thing for the council, for outcomes for children. And obviously as a side issue, because it's not about money, but it could potentially be a saving too. But we struggle to understand some of the processes, and I think that's because it's early stages. I think the executive definitely want to be involved in this and to contribute, further understand it, and you know, help Cabinet if we can to guide this towards a positive outcome.
Okay, and any comments on the scrutiny recommendation before I bring Councillor Skelton in?
Chair, just to say in relation to the recommendations from scrutiny, yeah, absolutely, we can take something back at an appropriate point once we've been through the process in the way outlined and commented on by Councillor Holmes.
A couple of things. Any particular reason that we know of why Derbyshire is not involved? And also, obviously this is a fairly new concept for the UK, but I presume it's been more extensively used in other countries, perhaps. It would perhaps be useful for all councillors to be either given some website links so we can learn a bit more about this. Thanks.
Shall I come back? Yeah, thank you, Councillor Skelton. Derbyshire were involved in initial conversations about the social impact bond, but made a decision that at this point in time it wasn't right for them. So we've progressed with the D1, N2 process going forward. I think that there will be a whole wealth of information that we could send through that give some examples of how the authorities referenced in the report have used social impact bonds, but also how other non-public sector bodies, where they started from, have used SIBs with this kind of outcome-based approach. So I can take that forward.
Okay, so coming to approve the recommendations as set out in the report. Show of hands, please. Okay, thank you. Agenda item number 14, the payment of an annual grant to Derbyshire Wildlife Trust for the management of land called Derwent Meadows at Derby Commercial Park, Rainsway, Derby. Councillor Shanker, please.
Sorry, Chair, I am a member of the Derbyshire Wildlife Trust. Do I need to declare that?
So long as it's, we will note the declaration, but so long as it's not a pecuniary, it's fine.
Thank you, Chair. So back in 2007, the Council granted planning permission for a large commercial development known as Derby Commercial Park. Part of the 106 funding was the developers would gift a piece of land, 60 acres, to the Council to create Derwent Meadows. This report seeks to use the money from the developers toward a contract to DWT to manage that nature reserve on behalf of the Council for the next 10 years. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Councillor Skelton, please.
I was just wondering whether at all there will be any public access, and if so, what sort of public access? Doesn't say in the report.
Hello. The land is a nature reserve, and there will be public access. In fact, the access will be improved as a result of this proposal. Derbyshire Wildlife Trust will, I think, develop some bird hides, and I think will certainly encourage a lot of school children and local residents to visit and become involved. So yes, the answer to the question is yes.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments from anyone? Okay, so Cabinet to approve the recommendations set out in the report. Show of hands. Sorry, I beg your pardon. Yeah, scrutiny report resolved to... Yeah, scrutiny, no recommendation, just to resolve to note the report. So Cabinet to approve the recommendation. Show of hand, please. Thank you. Agenda item number 15, budget outturn Q3. Councillor Shanker, please.
Thank you, Chair. A routine report for our budget outturn position for this current financial year at Q3. Quite simply and clearly shows the budget positions for our various budgets there in 1.1, followed by a number of recommendations at 2.1.
Just to reiterate the feedback from the executive, it was that if officers could look at the way to demonstrate the progress of spend on projects in capital. It's still an issue from the executive's point of view to understand how that's being reported, because I don't think it is actually being reported very well at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something we need to improve on. There are some legitimate reasons on why there's significant capital slippage this current year, but historically the council hasn't been brilliant with its capital budget. We do need to get better at spending more of the allocated funds in each financial year.
Okay, so feedback from scrutiny, as Councillor Holmes has reiterated, and thank you for that response, Councillor Shanker. So in addition to that, Cabinet to approve the recommendations set out in the report. Can I show hands, please? Okay, thank you. Agenda item number 16, performance monitoring, future of Derby pledges, December 2017 and Q3 results. Over to Councillor Shanker, please. Thank you.
Thank you again, Chair. So our Q3 performance report, some of our highlights. Work has, as you know, started on the new swimming pool at Moorways. It goes to Planning Committee tomorrow. We've supported nearly 700 people out of hospital and into their own homes or intermediate care as quickly as possible, obviously helping the NHS at this current critical time. Over 1,000 metres have switched to RAM Energy since its launch in September last year, another great achievement. Since April, we have supported over 100 local businesses to grow, and over 800 jobs have been created through council initiatives, and we have supported Derby Museums Trust in their successful bid of £3.7 million of local growth funding for the Museum of Making at Derby Silk Mill. Well over 6,000 school students have taken the chance to improve their employability through the E4E Business Connect programme, our biggest year intake to date. The council's accounts, as you know, Chair, for 2 previous years have also been signed off. So a good performance report for Q3.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just want to amplify what Councillor Shanker said on page 1 about the 678 intermediate care assessments. As we know, the difficulties that our health service up and down this country has faced in recent months, it's what we predicted, sadly, with hundreds of people stuck on trolleys, in corridors, people stuck in ambulances, and in the city, yet despite the reducing resources that we have, we're doing more with a lot less. And I think this is just part of the initiatives that we have in this city to support more people in their own homes, preventing people going into hospital in the first place, getting people out. But we can't continue to do this as demand increases year on year, and year on year resources reduce. And that's why, as you know, Chair, I've written to the Secretary of State. I haven't had a reply from him yet. That was a couple of weeks ago. I won't hold my breath. But it's important that we actually tackle this growing scandal of increasing demand and reducing resources. We in the city are doing all that we can, and I think all the staff ought to be applauded for it. But certainly we need to be aware of the challenges that we face in the coming months and years. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, any other questions, contributions from anyone? Okay, so there's no recommendations from the scrutiny board other than just a technical point, so I'll leave that to the officers to take away in terms of how the report's presented. So Cabinet to approve the recommendations set out in the report. Show of hands, please. Okay, thank you. Agenda item number 17, Contract and Financial Procedures Matters Report, and that's Councillor Shanker again, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Another routine report on our contract and financial procedure matters. Summary provided at 1.1 with details provided later in the report in section 4 and recommendations clearly listed at 2.1 to 2.10. Thank you.
Okay, any questions or contributions? Okay, so coming to approve the recommendations, including the addendums, the 2 addendums included in the report. Okay. Yeah, so we have. Yeah, so we're right. So we're approving. Are you okay with that, Olive?
Yeah, because there's a last 2 separately.
Yeah. Are these 2 separate reports? Okay. All right. Okay. Sorry. Let me just bear with us. Let me just confer with the monitoring officer just to clarify. So, Councillor Shanker, would you like to comment on the addendum?
Thank you, Chair. So 2 addendums. One's for the approval to receive external funding and acceptance of that funding to be delegated to Strategic Director of Communities in Place in consultation with the Strategic Director for Corporate Resources. And this is around the Joint Air Quality JAQU, a funding of £1.5 million in 2017 and a further just short of £800,000 in 18-19 for clean bus or from the Clean Bus Technology Fund. And the second addendum, which I don't have in front of me, it was circulated and discussed at that's the one scrutiny yesterday, and it is purely to allocate funding from the Library Strategic Review to support our ambition of community managed libraries.
Chair, just a question on the timeframe. Obviously, we know that there's one organisation in negotiation with the council over the CML for all 10 non-statutory libraries. Do you have any update on the timeframe of that, when it's expected the outcome to be known or announced?
Thank you, Chair. It's a bit difficult to announce a time frame until we have signatures on the dotted lines. The whole purpose of this recommendation for Cabinet was to, we are pretty much on the final stretch of that agreement, and this should be the final bolt, nuts and bolts in that mechanism, so we should be announcing something soon.
Okay, so Cabinet to approve the recommendations and the 2 addendums included in that. Show of hands, please. Okay, thank you. Okay, agenda item number 18, exclusion of press and public. Okay, so to consider a resolution to exclude the press and public during consideration of the following item. So that under section 100 of the Local Government Act 1972, the press and public be excluded from the meeting during discussion of the following items on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of schedule 12A of the Act, and that the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. Okay, so